This is Joe Carpenter. Today is March the 3rd, 2021, and I'm interviewing Larry Pink for the first time. This interview is taking place at the UTA Library in Arlington, Texas, and this interview is sponsored by the College of Liberal Arts and is part of the Maverick Veterans Voices Project. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Where are you from originally, and what can you tell me about your growing up?
Well, I say I'm from Dallas, Texas. We moved there when I was in the fourth grade from a little town south of Dallas called by the name of Waxahachie, Texas. We lived there until I came here to Arlington to go to school.
And where did you go to high school?
South Oak Cliff High School there in Dallas, Texas, over off right around from the Veterans Hospital.
I see, okay. And were you involved in ROTC in high school?
Well, it's an interesting story, I think. Yes, I was involved. 10th grade on. I didn't go to high school to be in ROTC, but it seemed that a man by the name of Colonel Carrington, who was very influential in me getting in ROTC, came to the gymnasium one day and asked all the kids in gym if you want to be in Texas heat and outdoors, which was a strange question because ROTC was outdoors a lot. Or do you want to join ROTC and we can play with rifles and do things and learn to read maps and stuff like that. So half the class in gym got up to go to ROTC. The other half stayed in gym. I didn't know that was a thing to do, but that's what we did. And that's how I got involved in ROTC.
All right. And were there any family members that you had that were in the military?
Yes. My younger brother Melvin was in the Marine Corps. My stepdad Leonard was in the Leonard Miller was in the military, in the Army. My father-in-law was in the Army, J.P. Estes. I have nieces that were in the military, the Air Force, and I have nephews, great nieces and nephews that are in the Navy now. So yes,
wow. It's quite a family tradition. So how did you become interested in the military?
I thought about that question, and it goes back to when I was little, playing with little Army soldiers on the floor. We would get a bag of Army soldiers, plastic soldiers, different figurines, and we would just play around with them. And I didn't see those movies on television of Patton, who later I saw at UTA speaking back in the 70s. Not him, but his son was also a commander of Fort Hood, Texas
Is that right?
base, and I got a chance to see him. He was one of my idols. So watching Patton when I was growing up and watching the movies about armies and Napoleon and all of the great battles that I could get my hands on.
So why did you choose to attend UTA, University of Texas at Arlington?
Two reasons. I interviewed with several universities in the area, Bishop College, North Texas, as well as I thought about, and over the phone we talked with Prairie View A&M and UTA, and I chose UTA after those interviews, and Colonel Carrington, who I mentioned before, took me around to three of those universities to see and talk to the Corps cadets on those schools, on those campuses, and the other reason was I saw the Jodies march in a performance. They had a saying that they take the name of the University of Texas at Arlington around the world and put this university on display. And I saw them march, and I came to a camp on campus here one summer, and I wanted to go to school here for those two reasons.
And the Sam Houston Rifles were still quite an award-winning tradition when you were a member.
By all means.
What was your major, and why did you choose this particular major?
I started with architecture. I changed a couple of times. Architecture, because I had a very influential teacher in high school. One of the electives I had was architecture, and I was told that I had a very imaginative mind, and liberal arts would probably be the best for me.
Right.
And I loved architecture. I would love to change things, design things, and I later changed it to criminal justice because I also wanted to be a police officer.
I see.
and with a minor in military science.
Was there anyone on the faculty who influenced you?
There were several in the School of Architecture. It's hard to remember their names now. As a freshman back in 1974, I probably remember their names over time, but they've kind of been lost, and I'm getting a little bit older. But
Sure.
for the different schools, there were, for the School of Architecture and the School of Criminal Justice, I thought there were several on the faculty that helped me.
And what year did you graduate?
I did not graduate from UTA.
See?
There were life-changing moments that came along and other opportunities, as well as a family, and I decided to go to work full-time.
I see. And so did you ever receive your commission?
Yes, I was commissioned in 1979 also
Okay.
in infantry here on campus, and my wife actually helped pin the bars on me.
Oh, is that right? That's special.
Yeah. Well, she was my girlfriend at the time.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Who else? Well.
My mom,
Your mom, right. That's good.
my mom and dad were there, so
Right.
we had a little group there.
Better include mom too.
Yes, mom did good.
Right. Yeah. And you told me your branch was infantry. And
Yes.
Anything beyond that? Any specialized training beyond infantry?
I was commissioned into the Texas. My first assignment was the Texas Army National Guard, infantry. It was an airborne infantry unit,
Okay.
and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I did transition. The unit did transition from infantry to armored cavalry,
Oh.
and my unit became a howitzer unit, self-propelled howitzer unit. So you can imagine an infantryman standing there wanting to go put camp in the weeds, and you get a big old M109 howitzer to learn how to use and direct fire for. So
It's hard to hide those too in the
Yeah.
weeds, isn't it?
it is very
A little
hard.
bit. So where did you go for training?
A school here at UTA, we went to Fort Riley, Kansas for camp, advanced camp. I also went to the airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia, while I was here on campus. Afterwards, in the military, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, for infantry officer basic course. All of my artillery training was hands-on, learned on site, on the weekend, nights, fire direction center, forward observer training. All this stuff was done on my own time in the National Guard.
And how would you describe this experience, this training experience, and your early military experience? How would you describe that experience?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. People ask me all the time, why would you want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane? But that part I enjoyed. I was physically fit as a young man, a young person, and jumping out of planes is something I really enjoyed. And the National Guard allowed me to jump anytime I wanted to, any weekend,
Right.
with my unit or with other units. So that was fantastic. I was ready for it. It was infantry. It was physical. It was the Corps got me ready for that part. They didn't. I was not ready for the artillery part, but I got myself ready.
Right. Were you assigned or deployed anywhere overseas?
No, I was not assigned or deployed overseas. We were training, and I was a transition officer for our unit for a reforger, return of forces to Germany, and the unit was tagged to go active duty and go on reforger to Germany, but no, I was not. That was canceled. The Army went in a different direction, and we did not go. We get deployed on that. No.
And I understand that you met your wife and were eventually married to her, and y'all met at UTA. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. We met on campus here. I had seen her around.
Yeah.
I had seen her in lab over on the South 40. I think it was called, the South 40, the parking lot just on the other side of University Drive here, where we had once a week training, and so I knew who she was.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's in her interview, so you might as well put it in. Give me your side of it.
Well, we met several times during those activities in the Corps pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I was, it's a funny story for me. I was told I needed to get a date for a special occasion. A Jody dinner is what they called it at the time. And I was an underclassman. And I was told to look to my left and look to my right. Those are my class buddies, unshaven and burly and sweaty from all the exercise. And if I don't get a date, one of those two are going to be my date. So between Orlando and I think it may have been Daryl on the other side, I didn't want either one of them to be my date. But I knew about Claudia, so I called up to the university here, got the secretary to see if she could find Claudia. And she ran around and I begged her, and she found Claudia, and I got her to the phone and I asked her, and luckily for me, she said, yes, I'll go with you. And
how long has that date lasted now?
41 years.
Wow, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So during your career, how did you, your military career, your career as a student at UTA, how did you deal with stress?
On campus, it was the stress was quite difficult. I came from a family of 6. Part of that time was from a single parent household. I was the second one to go to college in my family. My sister was at Abilene Christian College, but the stress was mainly from finances. Getting worked on campus to start. So. Later moving to United Parcel Service, so the campus pay wasn't that great. It got paid on Thursday and it ran out on, I think, Monday evening sometime, or Tuesday morning. You can only buy so much pizza with that, and tacos with that. So, but the stress later on in the military was a different kind of stress.
Yeah.
My wife was in the military also. She was in the reserves, and I was in the National Guard. So the planning, the kids, the children, the working full time, as well as National Guard for me and reserves for her, and listening to her stories about her unit and my stories about my unit, and trying to plan out a year in advance the activities and birthdays and movements and training and once a month. And I learned real quick that one weekend a month thing was really for privates, not necessarily for second lieutenants.
I see.
There's a meeting for the meeting and a meeting for the meeting, and then there was work.
Yeah, I see.
Pursuing a career.
So how did the National Guard differ from Claudia's experience in the reserves?
It was just conversations we had that I thought was just so fascinating to see how another unit operated, from the glimpse I could get from our conversations of how the things they concentrated on weren't necessarily the same things we concentrated on. I was more people, because it was everything we did in the airborne was on our back.
Right.
I just found it fantastic that she could go to the field with coolers. She could take. She had mechanics. She had people that had needed tools. She had people that needed skills to work and fix things. And if we didn't need it, we just threw it away. We couldn't carry it. It didn't do as much good. I just thought it was just so great to hear about firsthand the way another officer. She outranked me.
She did?
Yes, she was a captain.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Some people say she still outranks me,
Right.
but that's okay.
Right.
But I just thought it was fascinating to see how the two units did things. But it all worked.
She's outranked you for 41 years now.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. And how long did you serve in the National Guard?
I was in the National Guard for 10 years.
Okay. What year did you leave?
1979. I left. I'm sorry, commissioned in '79 and left in '89 with it was kind of a decision that had to be made at the time. My wife was serving, I was serving. One weekend was hers, one week was mine. They overlapped sometimes, so mom had to step in there sometimes and keep the kids. And it was either get out at that time or accept the promotion board to captain and take an assignment as a unit commander at Camp Mabry in Austin, where the National Guard headquarters were at that time. I'm not sure if they're still there now, but it was either a choice.
Right.
So I chose to continue my career at UPS Logistics and somewhat regretfully resigned from the National Guard.
And what was your rank when you resigned from the National
First
Guard?
lieutenant.
First lieutenant. Okay. And were you awarded any medals or citations while you were in?
Yes, the jump master was one of my more proud of awards, but making that badge was great, and several others. And the infantry has so many of those type of things. But my Army Commendation Medal for supporting the summer camps and movement from all the National Guard units, because we didn't have all the equipment we needed in one place to go to camp as an artillery battery or company. So we had to pull it from all the Guard units from all over the state to get enough at Fort Hood if Fort Hood didn't have what we needed. So that was a logistical challenge that required more time and effort.
That was kind of a challenging time in the military, wasn't it? The late 70s into the early 80s.
Reagan was going to, President Reagan was we had old equipment,
Right.
Vietnam era equipment,
Wow.
and that was transitioning out. And we were transitioning in newer equipment. So the skills in most of my troops in the National Guard, especially in the infantry, were troops that were trying to get their 20 or 30 years in the military after Vietnam. So they were trained on one thing. To get the mentality trained on something else was one of the more stressful things. And so Reagan was bringing in more equipment and newer equipment, and that, which was great for me. I really wanted to jump, but I learned that there's another side to this whole thing. There's some other things to learn.
Are there any specific experiences or any people that you remember either from your time at UTA or your time in the National Guard?
What comes to mind mostly are the people that I interacted with in the Corps and watched their careers go on in and outside of the military, as well as the watching my wife's career in the reserves. The National Guard side, just the experience of jumping, and you actually say something and people actually get up and move and go do it. That was an experience I didn't get from my brothers and sisters when I was younger. So I just thought it was all fantastic. And, I thoroughly enjoyed my time.
Did you experience any discrimination while you were in, and do you feel this hindered your career in any way?
I did not experience any memorable discrimination. Anything that I can put my finger on, with a side note, but I don't think it hindered my career, even if I did. I think the biggest thing that hindered my career or discrimination that I received had to do with my last name being Pink.
I see.
P-I-N-K.
Right.
Big old badge on the front that says Pink.
Right.
So, which was all fun and games until I outranked them. And then I outranked them. Then my first name became Sir or Lieutenant or LT or something like that. Right. So I say that, but no, I don't recall any. I did not.
And was there anyone who influenced you in your military career? You mentioned Patton. Anybody else you can think of?
Yes, there was just the whole experience of watching the cadets that left UTA and went in the military and came back, and a whole plethora of cadre that came through, that had been on active duty. I mean, I just soaked it all in. I learned something from every single one of them, and to single any one particular one out, I can't really do that. Going back to Colonel Carrington in high school, if I had to.
Right.
He was a black colonel in the U.S. military. He was very, very adamant. He said to me one day, I told him I wanted to go in the Army. He made me executive officer in the battalion in high school. He said, Larry, if you're going to go in the Army, I want you to go in as an officer. So I said, what do I have to do? He said, when you graduate, you need to go to college.
Right.
So he stuck with me for those next 2 years and right along with me until I got to UTA.
Wow. Was there anyone that you served with who you have memories of, or any funny stories that you have, anything like that?
Well, the experience, the funny memories, and the mentors from the Corps, I mentioned that, were different than the memories I had from my unit, in the infantry as well as in the artillery. They were much more technically minded and detail oriented in the artillery than we were in the infantry.
Right.
Those memories had to do with great sergeants.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt that a lieutenant coming out of college, going straight into the National Guard, was not going to be as efficient on the way units ran without those senior people being able to hold my hand and teach me a few things. Everything. A funny memory would be one of my mass jumps at Fort Hood when Staff Sergeant, can't remember his name, came up to me, but I do remember he had chew. Back then, you could get that chew in a bag, and you open it up, and the full put it in your cheek here and put it in your cheek there. And he could tell I was a little nervous. My first mass jump, we were lined up along the runway, and he said, "Take some of this, LT." So I got some, put a big old chew on this side, put a big old chew on this side. And I can remember on the plane, we had bags above our heads, and we're crammed in there, like this. I reached up and grabbed one and let it go in the bag and tied it up and stuck it with me because the Air Force wanted us to take everything with us. We couldn't leave anything on their plane.
Right.
And I get on the ground and I'm like, oh boy, that was wild. And he finally came over and he asked me how did it go. I said, "Went great." He said, "Man, but I feel dizzy." He goes, "Well, you didn't swallow the chew, did you?" I mean, I'm a kid from Dallas, Texas, in the inner city. Right. I didn't know that you were supposed to not swallow the chew. And they all got a big laugh out of that. I think I became their buddy after that.
Oh, that's good.
And so
you were in the club.
I was in the club then. I said, okay, now I know.
Oh, so other than chewing tobacco, is there anything that reminds you of your service? Any music or sights or smells or sounds?
Every time I hear or see a parachutist, it takes me back. I thoroughly wanted to jump. I thoroughly enjoyed jumping. I didn't know I wanted to jump as a career in the military, but glad I was assigned to that airborne infantry unit to begin with.
Right. And do you remain in contact with anyone with whom you served?
Not in the National Guard. I'll see someone every now and then because I didn't move very far from where I grew up there in Oak Cliff. I'm in Duncanville now, but I'll see someone at the dentist's office or I'll see someone at the mall, and they'll remember me for mostly my enlisted, but we've grown way apart over time. But the Corps here, those that have gone on with their careers, and many of them are out now that I went through the Corps with, and so I consider that keeping in contact with a veterans organization by all means.
Sure. And are you involved with any other veterans organizations? I know that you're involved with the Cadet Corps Alumni Council, but any other?
No, we are lifetime members of the Cadet Corps Alumni Council, and we honor that. And so we've been on the board. We've done many projects with them. Not so much here lately, the later years, but we still keep in touch.
And you were nominated, or you're being inducted into the Cadet Corps Hall of Honor this weekend. You and your wife Claudia. How do you feel about that, and how did you find out about it?
I served on the committee for a while in honoring those that have come through the school here and in the Corps of Cadets. So I was familiar with the process and understanding it. Andy Cano, Colonel Cano, nominated me, and my wife, and that's how we found out about it. And he is very persistent, which I think is an attribute that served him well over his career. And how do I feel about it? I'm surprised that others would feel like how I've lived my life, or how the route that I've taken would be something that would be that they would say, yes, this is something that would meet our standard of what we're looking for. I considered myself a citizen soldier. Worked 36 years as a career in corporate America, but I also served my 10 years and completed my obligation. Back then, it was a 6-year obligation to the country, and so I'm honored. I am thoroughly honored. I'm somewhat speechless.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, as I mentioned to your wife, that's quite a group of people you're joining.
Oh.
Special group of people.
Special, very special.
With regard to your service, would you do it all over again?
Yes.
Would you do anything differently?
Yes, I would probably volunteer for more schools that came up, more training, more specialties, even more so. For example, there were so many cadets at that time, and only so many slots for cadets to go to Ranger School and Airborne School. Right. We had a choice. Those of us that met the requirements to go to one of those schools, you could choose Airborne School, you could choose Ranger School, you could choose Pathfinder. And working full time in corporate America and trying to climb that ladder as well as climb the ladder in the military, I chose Airborne School, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I don't see how I could have gotten it in with a family, but I choose the family over that extra time away. Yes, and I chose it.
And you all been very successful in your family as well.
Yes, 3 children.
Something to be very
5 grandchildren. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. How often do you return to campus, and what do you think of the changes?
Oh, the changes are needed. We're needed. If we remain the same, if the campus remained the same today as it was 10 or 15 years ago, then it would be very far behind, more technical minded school than it was. I love the look. I hope it is more of a community on campus than what we somewhat had. It was somewhat limited to those who could get to live here versus the vast majority was commuters. But I love the look. It's hard to find your way around though. All my old streets are blocked off, or there's a building there. But I love it. I mean, it's the third largest university in the state of Texas, and even though we don't have a football team, but that's okay.
Yeah, top ranked for service to veterans too.
Okay.
What advice do you have for young people entering into the military?
I mean, there's not anything I would say would be advice to them other than go for it. Having been a citizen soldier with 10 years on the military side and 36 years in the corporate side, it is one of those things where HR for years, I saw skills coming from those that have served that I couldn't find in developing employees within our organization.
Interesting.
I found skills of reliability, skills of loyalty, proficiency, down to attendance to work. I mean, and willingness to take on greater responsibility. Those skills that I got in the military, and I see from those that I've hired over the years, 2,000 of those were from UTA.
Wow.
Interviewed maybe 10,000
Oh my.
over that whole period. But those skills, we found it very hard to get those. Those skills are very valuable, especially once they get out or once they decide to go into the workforce. Those skills, it took us years to develop them. So I would say soak it all in, get it, learn to be a leader, and it'll serve you well.
Is there anything that you would like to add to this interview that I have not asked you?
No, I think we've done somewhat of a good job. I don't believe that I had a preconception of what questions other than the list you gave us that might be asked, which was fantastic, but gave me a chance to think about some things. But no, there's not. This is great. This is a wonderful program.
Good. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your service, and we're honored to have you.
Well, thank you for having us.